Finding out when you're going to be at the sun is 18 and 16.
7 p.m. That clock is a little slow. I'm going by mine here. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and good evening, and welcome to our September 12th, 2016 Board of Education Business Meeting. Tonight we start off a new school year, and we've got new student liaisons from Foreign and Law. We will have tonight Jillian Bendlack and Tyler Chavez from Law, and Julia Astrom and Pierce Klein from Foreign, although Pierce is not here because he's ill. So we're going to start. Julia Astrom from Foreign agreed to start first this evening. So welcome.
Hello. So we've had a very strong beginning for the 2016-2017 school year. So among the highlights, the Advanced Creative Writing class, taught by English teacher Mr. Ayusi, published a collection of short stories called Foreign Visions. So it is now available for purchase at Amazon and at Barnes & Noble. This is a student-created publication, and it is very unique and very exciting experience for all students. We are having an open house for all parents tomorrow night. There will be a presentation by the Foreign Innovative Thinkers, a Foreign leadership group, which will include a video about the student life at Foreign. It was recently made at the start of the school year, and it follows students around during the day. It's very cool. Guidance will be having a freshman parent open house on September 19th. They will give a short presentation on our school counseling services, as well as high school graduation requirements, other academic policies, and they have questions at the end. So they're looking forward to meeting all the freshman parents. They'll also be having a senior parent night on Thursday, September 22nd, and that'll be mainly to talk about all the deadlines for colleges, all the Common App and Naviance deadlines and applications that they will need. We're having 53 college visits at Foreign for prospective students. So some of these colleges include UConn, Yale, Marist, Conn College, UMass Amherst, Boston College, and the 4 state schools. Freshman orientation was a hit. The Foreign Natural Helpers and Foreign Innovative Thinkers, they did a tremendous job overall. They guided all the students around, found their lockers, and they had bonding with their advisory groups, which is brand new this year. We haven't done that before. And the freshmen are seeming to transition very well into Foreign, which is great. Foreign will have its first pep rally of the season on Friday. This is a student run by the Foreign Innovative Thinkers. So they put it together all by themselves, and it promotes tremendous school spirit. Everyone dresses up on Friday in the color of their class and really shows support for our school. The fall sports have begun, and each and every team is making great strides towards success. We've also rallied as a Foreign community to support Foreign alum Danny Kemp, who has an inoperable brain tumor. We've been fundraising for her by selling the blue bracelets for $2 at lunch waves, and we've delivered them all around the community as well, so all the local businesses and restaurants. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Jonathan Law, Jillian, and Tyler. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, guys. Law has gone off to a great start. In academic news, Friday, September 1st, we had our freshman seminar. This was a series of presentations for freshmen to help them transition into high school. This included selected seniors and juniors who split up into 4 groups, which were academics, extracurriculars, sports, and school spirit, and they each talked about their experiences in their specific category to the freshmen. We have a school trip to the inauguration in Washington, D.C. in January. They have had a parent meeting this past week, and sign-ups are ongoing until the end of the month. This is a 5-day trip through Explorica, and currently 30 students are signed up. Law has 5 new classes this year, and they are all off to a great start. The SAT math class is running first and second semester. SAT English is running second semester. We have AP Calculus BC, AP Computer Science, and Intro to Computer Science. The Law Academic Support Center has had 43 students come in the first 9 days of school, which is a 20% increase from last year. During the SAT last March, 75% of the 237 students taking the SAT met the benchmark for English. In guidance news, college visits with admissions counselors are scheduled for the next coming weeks, and the sign-ups are on Naviance. We have Mr. Kovacs coming in on Tuesdays and Thursdays to help students with their college essays. The Senior College Boot Camp took place on August 24th to help seniors get a head start on their college applications, the FAFSA, and standardized testing.
I'd like to say first, good evening, everyone. In Law Sports news, the fall sports began their season as Law Athletics hope to have 100% of their sports teams qualify for their respective state tournaments. Last year, we had 71% of teams qualify, so it is not an unachievable goal. It is a goal that every sport can achieve. Just today, Law Boys Soccer defeated a Hartford Technical School 8-0, I believe. And this Friday, Law Football has their first home game against East Haven. Fall athletes participated in an assembly after school having to do with respect for fellow athletes, coaches, and other teams. And all teams have or will complete and sign goal sheets that they will hang around the schools in visible locations, talking about their goals for the year in terms of what their team wants to accomplish and what they personally want to accomplish. And fall captains will be attending the SCC Captains Council tomorrow to hear a presentation on appropriate uses of social media and going through leadership building activities. Our fall sports pep rally will take place this Friday, and we had our first meeting after school going over preparations and what we want to see at the pep rally. And in the Law Amazing News section, clubs and activities have gone underway. Many have had first meetings this week. The Jonathan Law Key Club had a very successful first meeting. We had so many people that we had to have people standing in the back of the senior CAF. So hopefully they will continue to join us. And many clubs are having fundraisers or activities to raise money for foreign grad Danny Kemp. As we said earlier, the first pep rally is coming this Friday. And on this Saturday, we have Relay for Life, girls soccer, cross country, the National Honor Society, Keats, gymnastics, and girls basketball are all participating, along with students and people from all over Milford. Multiple students this past Saturday, on September 10th, participated in a car wash for 9/11 first responders at Dublin Automotive. So first responders from 9/11 came in to Dublin Auto, and they got a free car wash courtesy of law faculty and students. Homecoming has already been scheduled for November 8th. And the student-produced, directed, and hosted Eagle Eye News has started its 8th season last Thursday under the guidance of Mr. Kolenich. And the Jonathan Law Advocate has continued to keep itself updated and fresh with the addition of an official Jonathan Law Advocate Snapchat run by advocate editors and Mr. Kolenich for the purpose of live reporting and behind-the-scenes reporting of things happening around Jonathan Law High School. So these will include Snapchats from behind the scenes preparing for the pep rally, and any live reporting for sports games or any general activity around law that we would like to share with the rest of the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so students, if you care to depart at this time, so you can go home and work on your homework, you're free to. You're free to stay as well, but we understand if you want to leave.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Is there anybody here from the public this evening that would like to address the board? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to dispense with the public comment statement. Move on to the chair's report. I'll be brief. Tonight we continue with our policy review, board members. As we did last time, we're going to allow 45 minutes, and if we have additional time when we reach that, we will decide if we would like to continue on. Just for the record, Dr. Fieser had a concern on policy 1150 expressed by a constituent, so she's asked to take that off of the item 3A and move it down to its own agenda item. So we'll make that, if there's no objections, we'll make that item 3G so that she can discuss it with us. And other than that, I have no other report. Move on to liaison reports. Do we have any liaison reports this evening?
None.
From your schools?
No.
Okay. Great. Okay, we'll move on to Superintendent's report, Dr. Mazur.
Chair,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. DeGrego?
At 3 o'clock this Wednesday, we have our Milford Prevention Council is having their meeting at the Costa Azura, and I'm sure everybody got an invitation in the mail from Wendy Gibbons. We're all invited, even you, Pamela. All right, Ken Griffin, you're invited. Okay, I won't leave you out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. DeGrego. All right, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Glennon. Hello to all the board members, members of the public. School is underway, which we're really excited about. So I'd like to just take maybe 10 minutes or less just to kind of talk with you about just even, opening of school in the first 2 weeks. So those of you that weren't at the convocation, and for the public's sake, we actually had a wonderful welcome by Julie Ostrom because Foreign hosted this year. And we also heard messages from Mayor Blake, Captain Dumas from the police department, and of course Teacher of the Year Dave Fishman. It was really a superb morning, I believe, and it culminated with West Shore General Music students who led the entire staff in a rendition of Let It Be and This Magic Moment. They had rewritten the lyrics to This Magic Moment. These are students of Mr. Califas, and it was just a great send-off for teachers just to launch the school year. On the 29th, we opened successfully with just under 6,000 students. This is the first year in a long, long time that we began school on a Monday, and so kids were in, little ones on up, for 5 straight days. I'm sure by Friday they were all exhausted, but everything went extremely well. And I have to say that there's no way that we could begin to thank literally the hundreds of people who behind the scenes make everything happen at the opening of school. They talk about how great organizations are ones in which the people in them really are working in sync around a common mission, and clearly the opening of schools is evidence of that kind of action occurring here. The one downside is the 90-degree weather, which in the first week of school was pretty tough in a number of the buildings, since most of our buildings are not air conditioned. And then we even had some 90-degree days last week as well. Kudos to kids as well as the staff who just hung in there. The second floors of buildings were particularly challenging with that 90-degree heat. So with that, I'd like to talk then about some specifics. So, for example, in transportation, busing for the most part went very, very smoothly this year. You remember that we have actually more students being transported this year because of the changes in the walking distance than have been in the past. And one might have thought that, well, with that would be exponentially more, maybe complaints, questions, phone calls, and in reality, the exact opposite happened. There were fewer this year than have been in the past, which I think is a tremendous tribute to Durham Bus Company, but clearly to Judy Messolidis, sorry, in Mr. Riccitelli's office, who is just unrelenting in her attention to detail with respect to bus stops and bus runs, etc. And there's still some questions coming in. Those get addressed on an individual basis, but we feel really, really good. You're going to actually hear a full presentation on transportation at the October meeting, but we just wanted to let you know that we have we are transporting approximately 4,300 students every day in the district and utilizing 60 buses and vans. There are approximately 120 regular education bus runs, and more than 1,000 bus stops to get all our students here to school. And that we transport to our own 14 schools as well as to 3 parochial schools and 3 technical vocational schools as required by law. The other thing I wanted to say is that with respect to special education transportation, that's handled not by Durham. Those are handled by other vendors, and that's separate. But the special education transportation also went very well, from what I understand. So the collaboration that we have with Durham just continues to be maintained, and that makes, I think, really makes the difference. Speaking of special education, we've opened up another preschool autistic classroom, and that's going to be held at Live Oaks, and to meet the needs of students in the school system. The other news that we want to share, I think most of you have seen the Parson Perks, the kids who are running the little cafe here at Parsons during the day. And a year ago, that was still in the planning phase, and here we are a year later, and it has really taken off. The students are not only becoming well-versed in the skills they need for a small business management, like ordering and inventory skills, sales, working with money, customer relations, etc. They've expanded the stationary kiosk by adding a delivery cart that is independently manned by students, so they go to different offices all through the buildings, which lots of people upstairs here, which is mostly the city offices and special education, and the supervisors absolutely love. And the other thing that's wonderful is the kids who have been involved in Parsons, a lot of them are back, but now what they're doing, the kids are training new groups of kids. So we see new recruits that are now working at Parsons, and the kids are teaching them. You'll go up to get a cup of tea, and somebody will run over and say, no, Dr. Fieser drinks this tea, which, to teach them, and then obviously all the business side of it as well. So that's really, really exciting. And the last thing that they're starting to do is, so if you ever come in for your DMV, to see the DMV or pay your taxes, etc., this building is not easy to navigate, and lots of people get lost. I did for the first couple of months. I remember one night asking a custodian, could you please help me get out of the building, But anyways, so the kids now, what they're doing is they're learning the building, and so they're going to have kids at different parts sort of helping people to find where they need to go. So, for example, at one of the entrances, when people come in, there's one of the help desks there. There'll be one of the Parson Perks kids. These are kids in the transition program who will be helping out. So that's really exciting. The instructional program, just some real quick things. We have a new schedule in the elementary schools, which we think is going to be so much better. One is it's providing equity between and among the buildings with respect to use of time and time for kids as well as staff. And also it's going to provide time for teachers to do collaboration, which has been one of the #1 complaints at the elementary level, that there isn't sufficient time. The new computer science career pathway is underway, including the new course in AP Computer Science, and you're going to hear about the middle school component at the board meeting in October. Standards-based report cards will be in place for all grade K-5 students this year. Also, as part of a grant, I think you may remember that we shared this with you in the spring, that a grant on improving attendance among kindergarten children we received. So we've already hired our 2 outreach workers. These are attendance outreach workers that will be working in all 8 schools with the goal of reducing absenteeism among kindergarten children. There's a lot of research that's really shown that if you can get kids at an early age really coming into school, that it catches on, and they ultimately they're learning more. It helps them in terms of academically, but it also really helps them to understand the importance of being in school. And then lastly, significant curriculum work was done over the summertime in lots and lots of areas, certainly the core areas of math, English, social studies, and science, but also that was across all grade levels, but also there was work completed in health, physical education, world language, and tech ed at various levels in the school system. Lots of security upgrades over the summertime, enhance electronic access control, so being able to get into the building, but it's been enhanced. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm not supposed to know what it means, just that it works, so that's a good thing. New increased and state-of-the-art cameras in the schools, new radio communication systems, which allow school communication with central office, emergency responders, and other community partners. This is again through the radio system. More quick link stations in the schools. 911 communication from every classroom and office, direct 911 communication. New, what we call Go kits. These would be kits that if there was, for example, students had to be evacuated, you pick up the kit and it has all kinds of information in it that would be needed so that if they weren't able to get back into the school, answers could be made, and there's other, I think, is it first aid equipment and a lot of other things. So everyone has one of those kits, and then lots of other features. We don't ever go into detail about the security because we really don't want people to know, but you just need to know that many more steps were taken to make our schools that much safer, which is great. Last but not least, facilities, lots done, but I'm not going to go into all of that. I just want you to know that two huge projects occurred this summer. One was 5 roofs were replaced, and they're almost completed. In Harborside, Orchard Hills, Calf Pen, Pumpkin Delight in Matheson. So that will be finished up this fall at all of the schools, and it's really helping immensely. And what's going to be great is when we have torrential rain, we will no longer have leaks in the buildings, so that's good. And at Jonathan Law, a major abatement and floor tile replacement through at least a third or a half of the building. We had to shut Law down the entire summer, and Fran Thompson and his administrative crew and secretaries all moved to West Shore and operated out of West Shore all summer long. Plus, they also installed fire suppression and sprinkler systems in the industrial arts wing of the school. The whole auditorium was, all the seats were all ripped up, new floors, new, carpeting, runners down the center, etc. So enormous amount of work, but great things. School opened on time, and so it's good, really good. So I'm going to close with a story, true story, that one of our elementary principals shared. On the first day of school, a little kindergartner was in her bus line at the end of the day, and as she's standing there waiting to get on the bus, she started crying, looked pretty upset. So the principal walked over to her and went up to her and asked her, what's wrong? And she was expecting her to say that she really missed her mom. It's typical in terms of kindergartners. And instead, she looked at the principal with tears in her eyes and said, "I just had so much fun at school today, I don't want to leave. Can I come back tomorrow?" And the principal smiled at her and told her, "Absolutely, definitely, you can come back tomorrow." True story. So that's the back to school message.
Any questions for Dr. Fieser? Mr. Jagosinski?
I had 2 areas. You mentioned that the schedule for the elementary schools has been restructured to provide more time for collaboration. I'm wondering what impact that has on classroom time.
Thank you. Actually, no impact on classroom time. That was one of the goals. We actually just tried to ensure that every building was guaranteeing the same amount of time in each area at each grade level, and we were able to accomplish that.
What are the students doing when the teachers are collaborating?
It is through their specials time, physical education, art, music, and library media services.
The other thing that I wasn't quite sure, you said that there were 8 people who were looking at absenteeism.
Actually, there's 2 outreach workers who are going to be working in all 8 schools.
Okay.
And I met one the other day. I happened to be over at Kennedy School, and so I met one of the new outreach workers. So they're working, again, this is just around kindergarten.
Right.
But so each one would be responsible for 4 schools.
And are they school employees?
Well, now they are. We've hired them in
Okay.
as under the grant,
Okay.
and that's their role.
Yes, Ms. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the wonderful update. I love that story at the end. I had a question going back to the beginning about transportation. You said that there were fewer complaints and fewer calls coming in, and I think that's wonderful. And I'm sure a lot of it is attributed to Judy doing an excellent job. But I was wondering if you think some of it could also be due to the reduction in the walking distances, that you're getting less complaints from people trying to get on a bus.
Well, through you, Madam Chair, if you recall, the past 2 years have been somewhat tumultuous years for transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, with the reconfiguration and the redistricting, there was many
Right.
changes that took place.
Right.
Virtually every run had to be, and all the stops had to be rebuilt from scratch. At least at the elementary level, which is the bulk of the transportation.
So last year, we had an inordinate amount of questions, I'll say. The previous year was the year that the board directed us to implement changes which included consolidations.
Okay.
Consolidations of bus stops and consolidations of routes. And so we cut the number of routes and the number of stops by nearly a third of what we had the previous year, which met with concern on the part of parents and a lot of questions. So comparatively to those 2 years, this year, I don't want to say it was a breeze, it wasn't, but it was comparatively much less. And I think it's because of the fact that, a portion of it could be that more people were riding the bus. But alongside of it was a tremendous amount of attention and care went into building those routes last year and getting it right. And so I think that carried over to this year.
Sure.
Okay. There's still, I'm not going to say that when you're dealing with that many stops and that many students that are getting on and off the bus each day, there's going to be some adjustments, some changes, some things that have to be changed, and we deal with that every year. And that's what we do the first 2-3 weeks of school.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Dr. Fieser?
Hi.
Mr. Hagedorn?
On the calf pen, not the calf pen, Pumpkin Delight where the pre-K didn't go through and the families that still wanted to do it were supposed to be contacted and thing, how come they haven't been? Not all of them.
My understanding that they were, so I will follow up with you afterwards.
Okay.
Mr. Whiskeyman?
Just to follow up on the busing, when we consolidated 2 years ago, I think that was driven primarily by safety concerns because it was pointed out to us that fewer stops meant fewer times where the bus was stopping, and every time the bus stopped, it added to the risk factors. So that one of the reasons for doing that. Have we continued maintaining our consolidation efforts especially for the safety concern reasons?
We have. I mean, as we said, as Dr. Fieser said, and as the board knows, there's more students that are on the bus because the walking guidelines were changed. But as you'll see when we give the exact numbers, the number of stops hasn't increased dramatically, nor has the number of runs increased dramatically because we went through painstaking effort to consolidate those routes and those stops 2 years ago, and now we're taking the students the new students and building them into those particular stops. So yeah, I think there's no question we're maintaining that.
Thank you.
Mr. Jagodinski?
I just wanted to say I thought the convocation kicking off the year for the teachers was just phenomenal. You were so eloquent about the diverse student body and the need to address everybody's needs. And Dave Fishman and his story about, his son, his brother, who had birth defects and was bullied, and his commitment to stop bullying in the schools was just tremendous. And those kids from the middle school are a hoot. If you weren't there, you can't believe it. It was like a rock concert. People are swaying and throwing balls around and things like that. They were just phenomenal. It was a terrific morning.
It's the first time we ever had a non-elementary group, so it was like, oh, how's this going to be? And it was fabulous.
They should be going on the road. It's really incredible.
Well, I'll pass that on to Mr. Calabas.
Yes, he's phenomenal.
Any others? All right, thank you very much.
So the next item on the agenda is our budget priorities and assumptions for 2017-18, believe it or not. Here we are, 2 weeks into the school year, and we're already talking about the budget for next year, which is a little scary proposition. But so we bring these before you as a first reading, and just to make a distinction on the priorities versus the assumptions. The assumptions really are giving some specifics around particular budget areas, and if we're able to kind of declare what we think might be an increase, or if there are new pieces, that the priorities have more to do with, philosophically, some things that we believe in, and that we feel are important in creating the budget. So I'll take you through these. I'm not going to read every one of them, but you see that the priorities have to do with, safe facilities, that we continue to support and enhance the core instructional program, that class sizes, that the guidelines of the board are maintained, that professional learning for staff is able to be continued, that the district summer learning program within all of our schools continues to be supported, that our student extracurricular activities and athletics are supported through the budget, that the school resource officer, so we would be going into, next year would be our third year, full year, and so that we would want to see that continue. And then obviously, whatever career pathway we choose to go with, the board supports, and moving forward, that we would have sufficient support for that. So those are the priorities. I don't know if anyone has any questions on those.
Mr. Wiskiman?
I'm not sure if your assumptions are right, but on the SRO program, I know that we proposed last year for an increase of one SRO officer, but we weren't able to attain that. And I personally would like us to try again to see if we couldn't get one additional officer in the school. I think that would be very beneficial if we could manage to do that. Just a thought.
Okay. Any other comments on Mr. Wiskiman's comment? SRO?
I totally agree. I think it was something that we wanted as a board and that was beyond our control.
I agree.
I don't know if these things are going to have budget impacts, but, I think we need to be targeting two specific areas, hopefully this year and certainly next year. And that is the difference in academic performance in the middle schools, which quite frankly is shocking.
If I could just, we're talking about SROs right now, so that was the
okay.
question.
I thought we were talking about budget
no,
priorities.
No, well, I asked if anybody had any comments about Mr. Wiskiman's. All right, I'm sorry, go ahead then.
I mean, I think one of our priorities should be to address that problem in the middle schools, because there's a 20-point gap between Harborside and West Shore. And in math, there's, I guess, a 15% gap between Harborside and East Shore.
Well, we haven't had our assessment report yet, so I don't know how accurate that information is.
Right, 100%.
Okay, well, we wait for administration to provide us with the data.
I thought we were talking about potential priorities, I'm sorry.
Yes, we are, but we're not talking about specific achievement results right now.
Oh, so achievement is not priority.
I didn't say it, I said specific achievement results.
Okay.
Okay, so you feel that we should be targeting academic performance and?
In the middle schools, the gap in academic performance in the middle schools. And I think we should be targeting mathematics throughout the district, because we've consistently underperformed in that area.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Dr. Caesar?
I appreciate your comments. I think that, and maybe the board wants to look at the priorities differently. When we go to establish the budget itself, we indicate what are our priorities. So, for example, math being a priority, for example, if we would include that in, like, for example, the budget letter, and whether that has implications for the budget. It may or may not. Sometimes we will include something, but know that it doesn't necessarily mean money, but this is a priority for us. So I think, I hear what you're saying.
Right.
And it's something that certainly we could take into consideration in terms of when we start to create the budget down the road.
Ms. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have my copy of last year's budget priorities handy. Can you tell me like, what may have changed or what may be different?
So the first three are the same, with the exception in the second bullet, we added social and emotional learning. The fourth one on professional learning is, I would say, pretty similar. The district summer learning program, I think that there was specifics to, I think it was a little more specific last year than it was, than what we made it just sort of like global, all of the programs.
Yep.
The extracurricular piece was in there last year, the SRO was in there last year, the career pathway is new.
Thank you.
Right, Mr. Ricciardelli said it was in last year, but that was to create two of them moving forward, and this is really to speak to the second one since it's already underway, which is the computer science one.
Okay. Other questions on the priorities?
I had one question on the solar. Did they project the size unit they're putting in there, and did they project approximate savings? They usually do that.
We're on the priorities.
Oh,
still, the
priorities.
first
Oh,
one.
wrong one, sorry.
Priorities, yeah.
Yep, sorry.
Other questions on the priorities or comments? Okay, move on now.
So the assumptions are more specific. So we stated up front that the enrollment will continue to decline. But we did say which further hinders efforts to achieve economy of scale. And so, you know, for example, the enrollment is going to continue to decline at the elementary, but in order to achieve economy of scale, we would need fewer than 8 schools. I'm not making a statement here, I'm just simply saying that's what we mean when we start talking about economy of scale. Decisions around staffing and program redesign or development, in other words, would be driven by their impact on raising student achievement. So we look at, we make our decisions around the budget, much of them tied to what's the impact on student performance and student learning. The salaries, so this is a pretty defined percentage here of what the increase will be, particularly because we are anticipating that the teacher's contract will be ratified. We're anticipating that it may. So this represents actually what we anticipate for all of the bargaining units moving forward. Is that correct?
That's correct, and we anticipate that at your October meeting, there'll be a non-meeting with regard to the negotiations. We've reached a tentative agreement through the mediation process, and we'll be bringing to you at the October meeting for ratification of that tentative agreement. We really shouldn't talk much further beyond that because it's still under the umbrella of...
This is an average for all employees, though.
Correct.
Correct.
Health insurance is estimated to increase between 8 and 10%. That's probably the least definitive on the page, simply because it's so early into the school year with respect to what is the history of our claims, et cetera. You may want to say about how they don't even want to give us a percentage.
Sure. The percentages are based upon experience. And because there's not even 1 quarter of experience yet in this year, our health insurance consultants are very apprehensive to give us a number at this point. So we go through this every year. We try and it's like pulling teeth, trying to get them to give us a number, and they usually give us a high figure, and then hopefully by the time we get to the budget process, it's less than that. And that's typically the way that it happens. By next month, by the second reading, we may have more definitive numbers, but certainly when we present the budget to you, we'll have a more accurate projection of what the health consultants think the number will be.
Special ed out-of-district tuition is expected to increase by between 5 and 7%, and transportation by between 6 and 8%. Once again, that's the best estimate right at this moment. That could change very much so by movement of students in to the district or more students requiring specialized transportation. So it's one of those sort of unpredictable, but right now that's what we feel that the increases will be. The contract with Durham Bus Company will expire this year, and so we'll begin the process of negotiations with them. The current year's increase, so this year right now as we speak, is a 3% increase, and so we're anticipating going forward a similar increase, but obviously the negotiations will have to determine that. Natural gas and electricity will continue to increase by 8 to 10%. The cost of heating oil is down, as everyone knows, but only 3 of the 14 schools have dual fuel capacity. So the decline in the cost of oil doesn't really benefit us that much because most of our schools are gas. The solar installations, and you will then hear your question, are going to take place in the summer of 2017. But again, with respect to projecting any kind of savings for this budget for 2017-18, we won't be able to project. But
I wasn't sure if, like, when you pick a size, they do a whole evaluation of the size that's going in, and then what your projected savings are. I wonder, did they do that already?
We did. We put out an RFQ for a solar developer. That took place during the summer. We selected one, and then we applied to through the United Illuminating Company through the ZREC program, which is part of the Connecticut Green Bank. We won ZRECs, and I should say to the board, you traditionally have an energy update or an energy report that takes place in December, where we anticipate that we'll be able to bring you all kinds of specifics on this. But this is where we're moving to. You've heard lots of things about the energy conservation program, and then we talked a little bit over the last 2 budget years about energy infrastructure improvements, and now this is where we're moving to over the next 2 to 3, 4 years, is really going, putting solar installations on all of our buildings. Again, not getting too far into it, but because we're putting new roofs on all of our buildings, or they've already been installed on our buildings, this is the opportune time to put solar on those roofs. So getting back to your question, when we applied to the Connecticut Green Bank and the ZREC program, we had to put initial estimates of how many kilowatt hours that we would be producing. And those were generated by the solar developer that we selected. Now that we've received them, or we were awarded those ZRECs, now they actually do the engineering. That's the next piece.
I wasn't sure how far you went, that's why I was asking.
That's the next piece, to verify exactly, there's all kinds of things that they have to look into with the engineering.
Yep.
The roof loads, what kind of power is in there now and things like that. So anyway, 4 of them have been approved so far. That's Foreign, Law, Mathewson, and East Shore.
That's awesome.
We also anticipate that they go large, medium, and small. Foreign and Law fit into the large, East Shore and Mathewson fit into the medium, and then all of our elementary schools fit into the small, which is a little bit different than the ZREC application process that we just went through. So we'll be applying for some of the smaller schools. So hopefully next summer, the 4 other schools that we did the roofs this summer will be able to include in the 2017. But right now, we know that those 4 are definitely going forward. So there's going to be some energy savings, but at this point, I can't project with accuracy.
I wasn't sure how far you were into, because usually 17, it takes a long time to project that out, that's why. I wasn't sure how far you were out in it, but that's a great idea, I love the idea.
And we'll have much more information at that December update that we'll give you.
Outstanding.
Yes, Mrs. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So where's the cost of the solar installations? Is that a budget expense, or was that in the capital plan?
believe it or not, there is no cost to the district.
Okay.
It's a,
How's that work?
it's a 20-year program. It's funded through government incentives.
Okay.
What we have to do is, once they're installed, we're basically leasing our roof space to the Connecticut Green Bank, who will be funding it. And then we buy the energy at a reduced rate of what we're buying it at now over the next 20 years. And so there's no initial capital outlay. Aside from when we were awarded the ZREX, we had to give them what they call an assurance payment. So it was nominal. But we took it out of the money that the board funded for infrastructure improvements this past year. So it was under $20,000 for that. And that is our only that's our only capital outlay for the solar program.
All right, thank you. That's excellent.
So getting back to the assumptions, for the purpose of the assumptions, you're saying that right now it's too early to project potential savings, but as you get closer to presenting your budget, will you at that point have
A little better idea.
a little better idea?
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
The board's participation in the SRO program, we would like to continue it, and we assume that we would be continuing to pay 50% of the cost of the SROs. Obviously, efforts to find efficiencies within the budget, we always are seeking those, and we'll continue to do that. And the last bullet is new, and we learned this last week. We've been notified that for beginning the 2017-18 school year that we are going to be charged tuition for students who attend Bridgeport magnet schools. So that is specifically the Discovery Magnet and Fairchild Wheeler, and that we will be charged $3,000 per student. Bridgeport has been approved by the State Department of Education. We called to verify that they've been approved, and we're told yes. And so based on the current enrollment, it would be approximately $165,000 if we were to have to pay the tuition this year. So that's what we would build into the budget moving forward. There again, it could be less if fewer students attended next year, and it could also be more if more students attended. There is no cap on the number of students that, we cannot put a cap on the number of students to attend the magnet schools. The only, the receiving school could, decide how many students they may be taking from one district versus another, but we have no control over how many students would attend magnet schools, and therefore that number is not something that we can be assured of at this point.
Yes, Mrs. Krasinski?
Is aquaculture one of those, or it's not considered magnets?
We already pay for, don't we? We've been paying for tuition for aqua, just like we do for ECA.
Okay.
Other questions? Mrs. Dr. Gregory, I'm sorry.
I was just wondering, this $3,000 per student, what part of this $3,000, when the state gives us funding per pupil, does it cover the $3,000, or is this would the student be counted in Bridgeport's numbers, and therefore they would be getting the state funds for that student?
So I'm not sure how it works with magnet school. But we pay $3,000 to Bridgeport so that they get some funding, recognizing that they're getting kids into a school system that they're running with their staff, et cetera. I do believe that there might be some additional state funding, but I'm not really sure about on that end.
Yeah, I was just wondering if on their October 1st counts, they were also counting that student, therefore getting the per pupil from the state for that student.
Well, they would be, because any of the students who attend these schools, they're on Bridgeport's rolls, they're not on ours. I mean, they're residents of our district, or our city, but they attend one of the magnet schools, the same way with the students who attend in New Haven. We know who the kids are, but they're not part of our enrollment.
Thanks.
And just in response to a question that may be asked is, what about New Haven? So in speaking with the people at the state, we learned that for sure Bridgeport has been approved. We also learned that as of today, New Haven has not made a request. It has to be approved by the Commissioner of Education. So that's why you only have here Bridgeport. Because to our knowledge right now, we will not be charged for New Haven for next year.
Do we have students going to New Haven?
We do. We probably have, I think just under 50 students go to magnet schools in New Haven. Mostly elementary, some through grade 8.
Any other questions or comments?
Could I go back to the Durham bullet? I wanted to know whether the Durham contract, was this, we're renegotiating with Durham, are we also opening to other companies to drive the competition there?
Well, this is something that we grapple with every 3 years. The initial contract with Durham, and just to bring back a little bit of history, for many years, for decades, the city contracted with Winkle Bus Company. And then I want to say, about 14 years ago, the board decided to do a full RFP, and at that time selected Durham. The initial contract was for 5 years, and then since then we've had 2 renewals of 3 years each. So what would that be, 5 and 6? So that would be 12 years, about 12 years ago. The last time we made this decision, we came to the board and we gave you the reasons why we thought it was better to renegotiate rather than go out for a full RFP. I'm not ruling out a full RFP. All I'm saying at this time, and it's very initial, very premature and early in our process, but we're very happy with the services that Durham provide to us. And 3 years ago, when we came to the board with the recommendation to renew for another 3 years, we had done an extensive survey of the costs that other boards were paying throughout the state, and we found that we were getting very, very favorable pricing. And I think the board, in their wisdom, decided that it was better to renegotiate with Durham because the renegotiated prices was still less than many districts were paying. In addition, they did a number of additional things, like they agreed at their cost to put the fueling station at their lot, which saved us tremendous amounts of money on fuel. They also agreed to put and maintain cameras on every single bus. Up to that point, we were paying for the cameras and we were maintaining them. So there were other enhancements that Durham gave us at that time. So we're early in the process of deciding, but the decision has to be made fairly soon. If we're going to make a full RFP, it really has to be done before the first of the year. But it's major. I'm sorry. There's a tremendous amount of history, with the routes, and we were talking about before about how, the routes and the stops. It doesn't mean that it can't be done by another company. We did it before, but there are certain advantages with sticking with, the proven entity, as long as it makes financial sense, and as long as it makes,
My question comes from a place where I'm not sure I've seen a situation where having a more open market drives up the cost. So,
I understand, but there's risks. There's risks because, and this is probably not the right forum to talk about it, but there's risks in that because many times lower prices doesn't mean the best service. And when we're dealing with the complexity of our transportation system, we need to have top-notch service. I understand what you're saying. I do. Believe me, I do. And those are all the things that we'll weigh and we'll bring to the board in one way, shape, or form of a recommendation.
Would you be ready to do that in October when we have our transportation report, potentially, or?
Potentially.
Okay.
We wanted to get through the start of the school year before we started having any kind of discussions with Durham. But we may be able to do that by the October.
Well,
meeting.
maybe some more in-depth philosophical conversation about
Sure. Yep.
the pros and cons would be good. I had two questions. On the third bullet, I'm going to suggest that you maybe just modify that and say salaries for all employees will increase on average, to make that more clear. And then on the SRO piece, I've heard some board members indicate a desire to explore adding, trying to add another SRO. Would it behoove you to have some preliminary conversation with the mayor in the mayor's office as to what he would support? Because the bottom line is, the other half of the money comes from there. So, and the assumption that we will be responsible for just the 50% going into next year.
We can do that. So before we move off of this, can I just correct a figure that I just gave in response to Mr. Jagodzinski's question about the number of students in magnet schools? I thought of Bridgeport when I answered you about New Haven, because Bridgeport, obviously, it's a little more than 50 students. New Haven, actually, we have over 100 students. We have about 109 students who attend the magnet schools in New Haven.
All right, any other? Yes, Mrs. Brzezinski.
Do we have students from Bridgeport or New Haven that attend our schools?
We do. We have students from New Haven who come to us in what's called the Choice Program.
Okay.
So we have a number of students that come in.
But they don't, New Haven does not have to, well, we're not paying for New Haven. New Haven doesn't pay for us. We have no Bridgeport students that come?
No, we don't have Bridgeport students. And we do get, so tied to the question that you raised, Dr. Gregory, we do get, and of course I'm not going to remember the amount, but the state does give us a percent, some monies per student that comes in under the Choice Program.
Okay.
But that's a separate program from magnet schools, so we're talking
It is. I mean,
two
it's
different
called,
things.
I mean, it's all under the Choice Office,
Right,
but but these would be students coming into us from an urban area.
Right, because we don't have a magnet school here in Milford, so, right. Other questions or comments? This is a first reading, so we'll come back on the October agenda for second reading and potential approval.
Right.
Okay.
The next item on the agenda is our work tied to the 1,000 policies. So just to refresh everyone's memory, we, or you, I should say, went through a number of policies at the last board meeting. And there was a whole set of, I believe, 16, or actually it'll be 15 policies that everyone felt comfortable as is and that to move forward for a second reading and taking action. And then there was a set of policies that the board reviewed, had some questions about, made some suggested language changes, asked us to maybe make some suggested language changes, et cetera. And those are the 6 policies, will be 6 down below with the 1150. So what we are, how this is laid out for this evening is that there are 16 policies that, if I understand correctly, are ready to be moved forward for approval, which are listed here under 3A. Again, minus policy 1150. So, Mrs. Lennon, I don't know if you want to start there?
Yep, Ms. Tobias has a motion to read for 3A.
Okay, everybody.
Yes.
Motion that the Milford Board of Education approves the following community relations policies as presented. And these are all policies. So there's a P, I'm just going to read the numbers. 1101.1, 1112, 1170, 1210, 1220, 1251, 1316, 1321, 1322, 1324, 1330, 1331, 1410, 1412, and 1700.
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Federico. All right, do we have discussion on any of these?
I just have a quick question. Do these, if we approve these tonight, do these become the policy as of tonight or tomorrow
Correct.
morning?
Yes, they do. Any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, good. All right, so now we go on to 3B, Dr. Fieser.
So we're going to go on to the next set of policies. So the first one we're going to look at, you looked at it at the last meeting, on concepts, goals, and roles in community relations, and you asked us to, you made some suggested language changes. So if you take a look at that, the language in green is the change in language. So at the end of that first paragraph, for example, it is imperative that opinions of the community and school personnel are taken into consideration in planning, developing policy, implementing programs, and evaluating results. You asked us also to only use Board of Education once in all of our documents, which is generally in the first sentence. And so we struck out education or Milford if it was elsewhere. And then you really asked us to include number 6 down at the bottom of that page, which are the board establishing the following. And there were 5 that were already existing, but you asked to increase public understanding of the need for adequate financial support of the school system. So those were the changes that you recommended.
Any questions? It's in your packet.
It's not, I don't see it in the new packet. I don't see 1,000. Mine starts at 1,110.1.
Page 28.
Page 28 of
Oh,
your packet.
got it. Thank you.
Any questions on these changes?
Okay, so do you want, so we'll
No.
just continue and then vote on?
No, we can take, I would prefer to take action on each one as we go through, because they each have a separate agenda item. So we'll move on to a motion for 3B, P1000.
Okay, motion that the Milford Board of Education approves policy number 1000, concepts, goals, and roles in community relations as presented.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
So the next policy is communications with parents / guardians. One of the things that you asked us is that in this policy, in every policy where there's a reference to parents, that we would put / guardians. So you will see that. The big change, however, is the third paragraph down. It was pointed out, which we concur, that the language was awkward and didn't quite capture what the intent was. Specifically, that paragraph is speaking about, believes what the professional staff should be doing with respect to parent involvement. And so what this basically says that you asked us to do is just to rewrite the steps that were in there such that it was clearer as to this would be what we would hope that our staff would do. So you can see those 6 bullets are rewording of what's down below, with maybe some language added for clarity.
Any questions on those bullets? And then the last piece was to add at least annually to the last sentence.
Correct.
Any questions on the bullets? Happy with that? Okay. Mr. Bias?
Motion that the Milford Board of Education approves policy number 1110, communication with parents, guardians, as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
The next policy is media access to students. One of the requests was that we would have, again, guardians where there was the word parents, but that we would also be consistent in talking about building or school administrators or administration versus principal, etc. And so you will see examples of where we've chosen to use school in front of administrators where appropriate. And that's really...
I think this was one that we had asked you to run by legal counsel, correct?
No, what we asked is that, you asked if that was the language in the 5th paragraph, at the time of registration will, that parent guardians would have the option of granting permission for their children to be photographed, et cetera, and you wanted to make sure that that language was equivalent to the language that is on the forms.
Correct,
And that
yeah.
is verbatim.
All right.
Language is verbatim.
Yeah, there was some other reason other than just the housekeeping items that we had held this one out, so that, I think that was it. So is there any conversation on this policy as it stands now? Yes, Mrs. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just noticed a quick housekeeping item on the first page in the last sentence. It says parents who/guardians do not want their student interviewed.
Okay, so that needs,
Thank you.
the word who needs to be moved.
Parents/guardians.
Thank you. That can be changed. Any other questions or comments on this policy as it reads now? All right, Mr. Bias, motion?
A motion that the Milford Board of Education approves policy number 1112.5, media access to students, as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Next policy is on videotaping of staff/students. This was the policy that there raised a number of questions, and I actually sent the policy to our attorney, Floyd Dugas, to take a look at it. And he, as well as Carolyn Dugas, who is also an attorney in the firm, examined this, and they made some recommendations. One, what you can see is that we had combined the videotaping of staff and students by non-district parties, and their recommendation was to break it out. So what you see is at the top, the header, videotaping of staff, and with one sentence there, that they have to have the prior written consent of the school principal. And then videotaping of students by non-district parties, and you can see the change in the language there. That, videotaping of or other recording of students on school grounds shall be limited, and then that one sentence was very awkward that you asked about, and so their suggestion was if any student is to be filmed or videotaped and will be identified as a primary subject of the filming or videotaping, prior parent guardian permission shall be required.
And then this goes on to second page.
Correct.
Let's see.
So the first change is more just a clarification there, just an editing. The second one was language that was left out. So the recording may or may not be used in connection with assessing discipline or for disciplinary hearing agreements regarding the same. In the next paragraph, parental guardian consent, nor, again, grammatical change, staff consent. And lastly, this came forth from the attorneys. Here they suggested that that recordings by and on behalf of district personnel that include students may be considered student records, but not will. And the example that was given was, for example, if on a bus there was a fight on a bus, and I'm reading right off of here from the attorneys, and other district personnel such as an aide or a para capture students engaging in the fight, such a recording is not considered under FERPA to be a student record, but it may, because of the bystander students. In other words, they may be capturing other than just the kids that were in the fight. It may, however, it could be a record of one or more of the students who engaged in the fight. So what she's saying is, under your policy language, if the recording is made by the bus driver or behalf of the district's personnel or made by district personnel, and it includes students, then it would be a record of all the students. If we say will, it includes all students, that particular recording becomes a record of all students. And what she's saying is, this is a more burdensome obligation than what is required under the law, and so therefore she thinks that it really should be may. So we would determine whether or not it's the recording would become, or the videotaping would become part of a student's record, but it wouldn't automatically become part of it. If that makes sense. It's just like if you're in the school and cameras capture something occurring in a corridor, but all this, there's kids who are passing. You could have 20 students in it, but we're really only focusing in on 2 students for whatever the situation may be. Well, if we leave it as was proposed, every kid, it becomes part of every kid's record, but there's no necessity for that. It would only be the 2 students.
Okay, there are questions or comments on the way this policy is worded at this point? Ms. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I just want to say thank you for explaining that change in the last paragraph, because the original language bothered me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it, so that makes it much clearer and makes more sense. The section on videotaping of students by non-district parties, I know we talked about that a lot last time. And this sentence where it says, except at public events such as assemblies, plays, awards, ceremonies, we talked a lot about sporting events, and I'm not sure why we wouldn't just also spell out sporting events to be clear. We do it in the next section, but not in this section.
So what would you want in there?
After award ceremonies, to add sporting activities and other events, just the same language as below.
We could.
Okay. And I had a note from the last time that said that next sentence of if any student is to be filmed was going to be a separate paragraph, because I think we were trying to break that apart from the public events.
We can do that. So if we put athletic events after award ceremonies?
Sports activities?
Yeah, I was trying to be
Use the same language as
Sports
the
activities,
last
yes.
paragraph.
And then a new paragraph, if any student is to be filmed or videotaped.
Yes, because we talked about that not being part of public events.
Dr. Gregory?
I still am really uncomfortable with the first paragraph on the second page. Videotaping of teacher classroom instruction can occur only with approval of the teacher, and I'm just not comfortable with that. Prior notification of the teacher, I'm not sure a single teacher should have the power, if it ever becomes necessary for a child to have access to a videotape lesson, for the teacher to be able to say no. You know, I can understand why they'd want to be notified, so you don't have people doing sort of covert taping. You know, I understand why that's there, but the approval, I'm just not comfortable with it.
Well, the only thing I can say to you is that we sent this to the attorneys,
Yeah,
and
I
they
know.
said okay to that. I think it's, I think it's a protection of teacher rights here. You know, what I would say is if it was part of a PPT, or I should say an IEP, where that was required, I would imagine that supersedes this. But this policy is generally around videotaping of. Do you have anything else to suggest about that, Mrs. Hood?
I would just add that an IEP accommodation for a child to be able to videotape a lesson, maybe audio tape a lesson, that would take, I think, precedence over this. It wouldn't have to be followed.
Well, then could there be a caveat unless weren't mandated by an individual student's IEP? You know, I could get comfortable with it then, I'm uncomfortable with it. I'm uncomfortable with it personally as a board member, approving a policy that I can think of right before I approve it, that there's a reason to have something have to supersede it, to be counter to the
So might I
policy.
suggest that we, I know this delays it again, but take it back and put that language in, but run it by the attorneys again? If that makes sense. But I think I would feel more comfortable about that. I would imagine you would as well.
Thank you.
So what you're suggesting is that we would, you know, with the approval of the teacher, or
As
if mandated by an IEP.
Or you might want to be just a little bit more general with only with approval of teacher, unless mandated by law or required, you know, something that gives you, you know, there could be potential other items where, for some reason or another, there's a requirement to do this. IEP being one of them. Not sure there are any other at this point in time, but there might be, and from a policy standpoint, it would be better to see if you come up with some generalized exception language.
I hear what you're saying. So we'll certainly communicate that back.
Let's see what the attorney says.
Right.
Oh, okay. Sounds good.
Is there anything else on that particular policy before we move on, so that we can take care of everything all at once?
Are the other changes okay? May I just ask that? Are the other changes, is that one piece?
Does anybody else have any objections to the two slight changes other changes that were mentioned, the housekeeping changes? Okay.
And the next policy is visits to schools. This is another one that we sent to the attorneys just to make sure that we were okay. And what they added is paragraph 3. If an observation of a student should be required by an outside agency, the observer will be accompanied by an administrator or his or her designee. And the reason for that is it could be that the school psychologist would be coming in, for example, with the student and whatever, with the outside person. So it might not always be an administrator. It might be more appropriate that it would be the psychologist or social worker.
Questions or comments on this one? Dr. Fieser, I actually had a constituent ask me about, in the first paragraph, In order to promote a safe and productive educational environment for all students and staff, the board requires all visitors to receive prior approval from the school principal or his or her designee before being permitted to visit any school building. So I understand what the intent is with that, but they took that to mean that anytime anybody wanted to come into the building, they had to call and like make an appointment type of thing, prior approval.
Well, it says from the principal or his or her designee. So what that, I mean, you know, if people come in to the school, they're automatically, there's a greeter in every one of the buildings, there is a security person at the high school, so they just can't walk in and start to visit. You know, if they're coming in on the other hand and they're going to, they have an appointment with the guidance counselor, they can do that. Now, I mean, we didn't define visit, but
so I had a suggestion came to my mind, was perhaps to the second visit, to say that it requires all visitors to receive prior approval from the school principal or his or her designee before being permitted to enter any school building. Just kind of,
Do we get rid of the word prior?
that's, yeah, we could do that too. I mean, yeah, that's probably actually a better, to remove the word prior to, so, in the sentence above. Requires all visitors to receive approval. That way it doesn't seem as if they have to call ahead.
Yeah, because that's what it sort of seems like.
sure.
So,
Yes, Ms. Federico?
So may I just ask a point for clarification, then the way we're reading this now, school principal or his or her designee, that could be the greeter?
Correct.
And then just a comment then on the third paragraph, visits to individual classrooms during instructional time shall be permitted only with the principal's approval. Could that be principal or designee?
Could be.
I would wonder if that's, I mean, the greeter wouldn't be giving permission for somebody to go to observe a classroom.
No, they would
So
not.
that, I would think that should be principal.
Well, but
Or-
the principal might not designate that power to the greeter.
Could be, right, could be teacher leader.
Oh,
I don't know that it would be a teacher leader unless a principal had already given permission. However, it could be an assistant principal.
Okay. I'm sorry, I was thinking elementary school, but yes, assistant principal.
so would it
So
be?
for example, if, you know, there are situations where a classroom teacher actually is inviting parents to come in and visit because of something that's going on in the classroom. So obviously the principal knows about that, grants permission for that occurring, et cetera. But the principal may not be in the building, so it could be another administrator, et cetera, who affirms that, yes, this is going to occur.
So should it say building, what word are we
could put the
using?
with
School administrator?
School administration's approval.
School administrator's approval?
Can I just add something, Dr. Fieser? So typically what would happen at the elementary school, if a teacher was having a meeting with a parent even, they knew the protocol was to notify the greeter through an email to say, I'm expecting Mrs. Smith at 2 o'clock on this time. So they were aware, and at that point the designee would be probably the teacher. And the greeters knew if someone showed up that they weren't expecting, they couldn't just send them to a classroom, they had to call down to be sure there was an appointment and that teacher was prepared to meet with the parent. So there were a lot of different protocols. I, as a principal, wasn't aware of every single one.
Right.
So I wonder if it would be appropriate to say and/or designate meeting. Sometimes the teacher would know.
So, right, it is. So why don't we say the principal or his or her designee's approval, because then the designee is the principal saying, this is my designee, as opposed to just assuming it could be anybody, you know.
I disagree. I'm sorry. This is for instructional time only. This is for interruptions to the class time. This is not for a parental meeting with a teacher. I think it has a higher standard in my mind. So I see where you're coming from, Carol, but I think in this case, we really want it to be school administration, in my opinion.
Which it was in the way I was writing it, but maybe it needs to be more explicit.
History designee perhaps lowers the threshold.
Well, my concern would be if we're saying up above that the designee might be the greeter, then the designee down here, I would think, if we put the designee again, it could be the greeter. And from what I'm hearing Mr. Burt say, that a greeter wouldn't appropriately give permission for somebody to come in during instructional time. I kind of see it as being a higher level of responsibility as well, if it's, because I read that too, that it's during instructional time.
So does school administrator make sense?
To me, it does, school administrator.
Just so it's not limited to one person.
Out of the building.
Right, school administrator,
Right.
if there's other administrators, right.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a second person there. That's all I'm looking at, is that you don't want to stop everything just because the principal happens to be out of the building, or, you know, walk down the hall for a minute and you can't, you know.
So just to clarify again, in the first paragraph, we're striking the word prior, receive, so that it will just say, requires all visitors to receive approval. And then in the first sentence of the third paragraph, we're changing principals to school administrators' approval. Is that correct? Anything else in this policy? Are these changes minor enough that we're comfortable just having our approval with policy as amended, or do you want it back for third reading?
I'm fine.
Right.
So are we okay with saying permitted only with approval from school administration? As
I'm
opposed-
fine with that.
Uh-huh.
So principal is added, okay. So you're going to see the motion be as amended, right? Okay, all right, Mr. Bias.
Okay, motion that the Milford Board of Education approves policy number 1250, visits to the school, as amended.
Second,
Second?
any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And then the last one in this category would be 1150 that we pulled down from on top. So I received, this is communications with the public, and then responsibilities of school personnel. I received an
Dr.
email.
Beezer, just one second. I think we need to pull it out of our, let's find it.
Page 11.
What page is it on? 11. Page 11.
Oh, okay. In tonight's packet.
All right, thank you, I'm sorry for
That's
the
okay.
interruption. Okay,
Is suggesting that we might be violating First Amendment rights in this, so we sent it to the attorneys, and the suggestion that came back is instead of saying all personnel are expected, that we would say requested, to change the verb there.
are requested.
Right.
Does anybody object to that? Have any concerns? All right. Seeing none, a motion as amended.
Motion that the Milford Board of Education approves policy number 1150, communication with the public with the recommended change.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, very good. All right.
So you should feel good because you just approved 20 policies, revised policies, which is a great start in this whole process.
Okay, so we're going to pick up, it's 8:30, we've been discussing for half an hour, so we'll go 15 minutes and then see where we're at. But we're doing well, I think. So we're picking up with first readings, beginning with policy 1140, distribution of materials to and by students. Dr. Beezer. And This was a policy that there were one or two board members asked to have discussion on.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mrs. Federico.
If I may, so my question on this was, the wording talks about for distribution to students. So it's materials to be distributed to students or to be emailed or posted on a website. It doesn't seem to address material that's emailed to parents, which is something that's pretty common. And if we're talking about approval of the building administrator, I would think that we would want that approval to take place for any emails distributed to parents as well.
Yeah, I think, I remember you asking that question
In the email, yeah.
in the email that you had sent through. I think it's inferred.
Okay.
So for example, I mean, almost all the, you could speak to this, Mr. Burt, but the flyers that come through, a significant number of flyers that come through for approval are around events for students, a lot of them. But when they get approved, what happens is, I think more often than not, they get sent quote home. Am I correct in that? Electronically. So they would be going to parents, but it's really for students. So, I mean, we certainly can include it, but it's, I think it was inferred in the policy.
Because I remember, being a PTA parent and working on flyers, and I have to say that most of the time there was a review process, but not always. So there wasn't always consistency around that, and I think it's important to have this spelled out, that it should be consistently reviewed. I'm going back a few years, I'm not talking about today.
Right. I mean, any flyer that we receive, there's a process, and a lot of them get rejected. So because they're profit making, or they're just simply inappropriate, or they don't. We wouldn't. We should not be the vehicle for sending them home.
Okay.
Did you have any suggested changes, or are you just looking for clarification?
I didn't spell everything out, but I felt where it said students to take home or to be emailed to parents, just to add the word parents.
Do we ever email directly to a student? Any emails would be done to parents, correct?
Correct. I mean, I'm just thinking in my 6 years, once I did to the junior class 3 years ago when they were doing the field test for the Smarter Balance, and basically asked them, would they please take this seriously, even though it wasn't going to count for anything. That was the only.
That was you, though.
Yes, it was me. It was me. Correct, but I suppose there could be inappropriate things sent out from an administrator to students too.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Hack, I'm sorry, Dr. Gregory.
When I'm reading this, I'm not getting the same thing. So I was wondering, Ms. Federico, if you might explain where this is, because the parents don't come to take stuff home. So
No.
it's the students have to take it home, or to be emailed, doesn't specify emailed to whom. It could be to any family member or guardian.
Okay, well, it says for distribution to the students. I guess material proposed for distribution to the students.
To take home.
To take home. Okay, so you're reading it as students
I put
goes
a comma
to take
after the
home?
home, and I think you put a comma in your head before.
Yes.
Before it, so.
And when we're talking about the building administrator, that's everything going home through all the schools. Right, not just coming out of the central office, but everything.
Correct. What happens is if something is sent to a building, the building sends it up to us for approval.
Oh, okay.
That's, they, unless it's something that's advertising something that we know, that they already know is going on in the building, but if it's something outside,
Okay.
So realistically, it could be emailed to anybody. So I personally don't see the need to say parents, because it could be emailed, it could be an email going to anybody that has to be approved. Mrs. Krasinski?
Now I'm more confused. I was putting the comma after home or whatever, so I didn't see that as an issue, but anything that, any flyer, anything that goes within the schools goes up to central office first to be approved, even PTO and stuff like that?
No.
Or is this just outside?
This is really outside.
Okay.
This would be, yeah.
All right.
PTOs, that's a different thing. They're working side by side with the building principal. If something's going to be put in, there's a monthly newsletter. You know, actually, I think what has helped a lot of groups is Kathy Benetti's, you know, what do we call that, upcoming events.
Yep.
You know, and so you all click that open now on the website, and it's flyer after flyer after flyer after flyer after flyer, you know, that people can see. But this is generally outside groups that want something sent to let parents know that this event is taking place. That's a lot of what it is.
Should that go in that first paragraph then somewhere, that material from non-Milford Public School boards?
But it can be anything, because even, I mean, the first sentence says, "The building administrator has the responsibility to review and approve or disapprove printed and electronic material proposed for distribution to students to take home or to be emailed or posted on a website if the material pertains to only that single site." So that's where the PTA piece falls in. You know, if the PTA wants to post something to the website or send an email home, they have to have it approved through the building administrator, because it's only one site.
Maybe it needs to be put into two, I mean, I know it's only two sentences, so, but I was never an English teacher. So maybe the second paragraph is superintendent, because that is talking about the whole district rather than just one school. And I know I sent an email, but the single site confuses me. I don't know. I think you should say single school rather than single site or single building, or, I don't know, the site just.
So going back to the point that you're raising, so we have had some situations, not a lot, but I'm thinking of one in particular where a building administrator sent something out that shouldn't have been sent out. It was a for-profit making group, and I don't even remember what it was, but and I don't remember how I found out about it, but I was on the phone with the principal and saying, that should not have been sent out. It was nothing harmful, but it was a for-profit organization, and just simply saying we can't endorse something by sending it out. Most of the time, they're really, really good, but sometimes I think they get so many different requests, or they're looking at it and saying, wow, this might be pretty good for kids, and not thinking that, wait, this is a for-profit kind of thing.
But I think that belongs more in like an administrative regulation or between you and your staff versus being in a policy.
Exactly, and that's an example of how the building administrator is, we wouldn't be handling that for a single building. The building administrator would be handling it.
So, Mrs. Krasinski, are you suggesting that we break the first paragraph into two paragraphs?
Yes.
Do you see any problem with that, Dr. Fieser? The superintendent shall designate and make that a new paragraph? Okay. And how about the calling it a single site? Is that, can we find a word that might be a little bit more clear? Since we're talking about building,
An
how can we say
individual
building?
school? A single school?
A single building or single school?
Single school's website?
Well, no, it's just, it's not a website, it's just, it's meant to be, I think, the physical location she's talking about.
Okay.
It's a single school. So the word site in the first sentence will be changed to school, and then in the last word in that first paragraph would be changed to school. Anything else in this policy?
And
Ms. Federico?
If I may, just to offer a suggestion of the wording on my earlier point, perhaps we could say, or to be emailed to families. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I'm just trying to protect our building principals from someone saying, you know, I want to do this on behalf of the school, and I'm only emailing the parents, I'm not emailing the students and thinking that they don't need to get permission. So I feel like if anyone is going to be emailing something, we want to make sure that they're getting the permission of the building administrator.
So, should it be, the building administrator has the responsibility to review and approve or disapprove printed and electronic material proposed for distribution to students to take home, comma, to be emailed to families, comma, or to be posted on a website?
Yes.
I think emailed in general covers more of a broad, to make sure all emails cover. That covers the families, anybody. By putting families, you're specifically only to the families. Then if they send it to somebody else, it doesn't cover that.
Okay.
If I could speak for you,
Sure.
what I'm hearing you
Okay.
say,
Yeah.
is that the title talks about
Yes.
distribution to and by students.
Yes.
So you're saying that somebody could construe being emailed to students, because we're talking about students, and that if they want to email it to the families or to the parents, that doesn't fall under this policy, I think is what
Yes.
I heard you say, which is why she's asking for the clarification.
Can I offer another suggestion?
Yep.
What if instead of adding to families, we took out the 2 students? Approve or disapprove printed and electronic material proposed for distribution to take home or to be emailed.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Dr. Feaser? But then we also have the title. I mean, I was looking at the title,
Yeah.
distribution of materials to and by students.
Somehow taking students out, the whole policy is around students. So
I know.
take it out, kind of.
I was looking for a way to get around putting it in families.
you. Well, you could always say, or to be emailed to families for students, or, I mean, if that's what you're, I think it's inferred, if we say, or to be emailed to families, I think it's inferred that it's that for students, for students. You know.
I think my understanding, you know, the way I look at this is that whatever's going home, it's really basically for the students.
Right.
The fact that it goes via the students and the parents are the ones that are actually going to look at it and act on it is kind of, they're acting by default on behalf of the students. So, I mean, I'm fine with it worded, personally I'm fine with the way it's worded without making any changes to that particular first sentence. But, you know, I don't, depends on what the rest of the board.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
I
we
prefer
agree
mine
with it
is-
is.
Okay.
So with the explanation, you're comfortable with leaving it the way it is? Okay. So again, we're talking about changing just the word site in 2 places to school and then breaking out the first paragraph into 2.
And not putting in,
Not putting anything, not changing the other first line at all.
but are we using commas?
No, just leave it the way it is.
So the only change is school and then the new paragraph.
Right, and it's school in 2 places in the first paragraph. It's in at the end of the first sentence and at the end of the last word in the paragraph. Right, which is not the second paragraph. All right, so that's 2 minor changes.
So are we ready to move on to the next one?
Yep, so we'll bring this back. This will come, now, so these are all coming back for a second reading. Correct. Next meeting, right. Yes, we are.
So the next one is on school volunteers. And I would like to propose one change to the school volunteers, and that is in the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph. that we would say volunteers shall be required to submit to state and federal criminal record checks and a record check of the Department of Children and Families. And that's under the recommendation of the attorneys.
Where was that again, Dr. Fieser?
Fourth paragraph down,
One,
first
two,
sentence, it
three,
says
four.
volunteers may be required.
Okay. Change may to shall.
Correct, what that would, right. And then the next paragraph, it talks about that, you know, actually, I should correct that. It's the last paragraph, I believe, where the change is. The building principal shall request, or no, I'm sorry, if to a criminal background check if they are working over a long period of time. So the idea is that they shall be required to submit to criminal record checks and a record check. I'm getting myself confused here.
I would think it should be shall in both cases.
Well, what was the indication was is that the building principal can determine what a long period of time is. So the second paragraph would be may request a volunteer to submit and determine what a long period of time is.
Okay, but
Or shall.
if the building principal, why wouldn't we require it to happen if the building principal determines it's a long period of time? Because it's still, even if it is a long period of time, it still may, means he can or he doesn't have to or he can.
It's discretional.
It's discretional at any, it's discretionary at any point in time, the way with the word may.
But
Yes, Mr. Jagosinski?
if we don't have may, if we say volunteers will be required, I mean, that would mean basically that every chaperone had to be required, that, you know, almost every parent at some time or other would have to be required. Is that practical?
It's not. It's not. And forgive me, I'm trying to find the email from Floyd Dugas because I think I got confused here. So,
But isn't there a big difference between a record check and a background investigation?
record check and
Background investigation.
yes, there is.
So I think, you know, the difference between those two paragraphs is if they're there for over a long period of time, it's a much more involved thing to look at someone to do the background investigation. That's why it might be more discretionary.
Okay, I found it. Hold on. There it is. Okay, a board member is questioning the use of the verb may in the last paragraph. That was the language provided. I don't want to, and I sent him the whole policy. I don't want to pull to put shall in this sentence because how do we determine over a long period of time? Are you comfortable with the way it is written? His response was, I tend to agree with shall. You have the discretion in deciding what constitutes a long period of time. So what should be is that the fourth paragraph should remain may. And it's the last paragraph that should have shall, because that was the question that was raised, and he looked at the whole policy. And then determining over a long period of time. So in answer to your comment, you're absolutely right. I mean, we just simply couldn't do that. But on the other hand, if there are schools that have volunteers that are there, you know, all the time. So for I give the example of, and somebody asked this question a year ago, I thought. The football teams, for example, have volunteer coaches. Do they have, background checks? Yes, they do, because they're working for the entire season with our kids. Whereas the chaperones on a given field trip, that's not necessarily the case.
Yes, Dr. Gregory?
So are we saying that a volunteer would not have to have any check to see whether they're on the DCF registry or the sex offender registry?
Well, they would be on the sex offender registry if they come into the school, which we would require that they come into the school. And right then and there, with respect to the school gate guardian, that's what the school gate guardian reveals.
So why wouldn't we want shall in the fourth paragraph as well?
Because for the same thing that we just, the question that was just raised by Mr. Jagodzinski, to talk about having to state and federal criminal records and a record check of DCF and child abuse is much more extensive. So if we required that, for example, of every single volunteer, on the other hand, the volunteers would be picked up on for a sex offender list. That
I
would come
see what
through.
you're saying. I got confused. I thought embedded within that paragraph, the no person required to register. I was afraid that that may was also applying to that second sentence. That was my mistake.
Right, so
I think that paragraph might have buried the lead.
right, I mean, there are some special procedures in place for, if we have a parent who, for example, may be a sex offender. So I apologize for the confusion.
Oh, sure.
So may remains in the fourth paragraph, and shall is the change in the last paragraph.
So in light of that, I have a question on the very last sentence. People who wish to volunteer and have background checks that produce a criminal history record, should that be may or shall? May or shall be disallowed from volunteering and will only be allowed to volunteer after an interview with and clearance from the superintendent?
It would be may. So I could give you an example. You have a parent who's 40 years old, and at the age of 19, they were arrested for smoking marijuana. I'm not diminishing the fact of the smoking marijuana, but I mean, it was 20 plus years earlier. Do we say, no, you cannot volunteer? I mean, I'm just giving that as an example.
So would that be a case where you or your designee would have to have an interview with the person, and then you may or may not say that they could volunteer?
They would. I mean, again, this is tied to someone who's going to be a volunteer for a long period of time. We're not talking about a chaperone. We're talking about someone who's in the building, or working, regularly with kids, like kids on a football team, et cetera, where there's daily practice, et cetera. That's what we're talking about here.
So I have a question about that then. So does school gate guardian pick up criminal history as well?
No. No.
So that whole paragraph, that last sentence then only refers to people who want to work with students will be working with individuals over a long period of time.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions on this policy? Mr. Whiskeyman?
Just a thought, in terms of the administrative regulations regarding the definition of long period of time. I mean, we do have some definitions regarding substitute teachers who, after a certain period of time, if they're on a substitute, they contractually have to be considered long-term substitutes. There's a time frame in there, right?
Mrs. Capazza, how do we handle substitutes?
Well, substitutes are employees, so they go through all the criminal background checks. But
Even on day one?
yes, before day
okay.
one, yes.
But in
But
terms
these
of...
are
These are volunteers.
But in
These are only
terms of-
volunteers.
But in terms of defining
Long period
long-term,
of time.
I was thinking that we have a point at which we say, oh, you're a long-term substitute because you've been here more than
39 days.
39 days or something like that.
Which I would think
So-
for a volunteer, 39 days is a lot of time, so that's probably the wrong threshold, but I
Oh,
see what
okay.
you're saying.
Well, I was just trying to see if we had something that might give us some guidance as to what long-term meant.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, that's it.
Any other questions or comments on this policy? Okay, seeing none, this one will move on to a second reading. All right, we've been at it for 45 minutes. Do we want to continue a little bit longer? We only have, the last agenda items are just the Human Resources Report and Disbursement Report and the consent agenda. You want to continue another 15 minutes?
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
Yes,
go ahead.
anybody object to that? Okay. So we're going to go on, Dr. Feaser, to, I think, 1311.
1311 is political activities in schools. We thought that this policy was succinct, but
If there was somebody that requested.
Yeah, I did. And I worked on campaigns, so I have a special sensitivity to this particular thing. I actually have a suggested change for the second paragraph. We actually had an incident in the schools where a elected official who's running for election came to the school and addressed the class. And when an elected official is running, that type of event is a campaign event. And that elected official talked about proposals that that official wanted to propose, policy changes that that official was promoting. And that is really, again, pushing a particular political agenda. And I don't think that our students should be used in that way. So I think this actually is very good, but I just wanted to try and give a little more weight to it by changing the second paragraph to, therefore, activities in schools during school hours by any candidate or person associated with the political campaign shall be restricted to those of an educational nature that are beneficial to students as part of their program of study and must be conducted in a way that does not advance, rather than advice, advance any candidacy or agenda of any political party.
The last.
I have a question, if I may. Having been a political science teacher, I used to bring in local candidates for any party that was involved, including Libertarian. And part of the process of speaking to seniors, they would have to talk about their platform. So I'm not, does that something advance their candidacy or their platform if they describe their agenda?
You know, if I had not considered that, but if we do those things, then that opportunity should be available to all candidates for that office.
That is typical of a
Right.
class, of any kind of political science class. You
Right.
wouldn't offer it up to one candidate.
Yeah, I think that, you know, that would be appropriate.
Does that run counter to the
Yeah.
statement here?
Yeah, I think that that exception would have to be added to this.
The last sentence here on the policy talks about staff members not using school time, school property, or school resources or equipment for the purpose of furthering the interest of any political party, the campaign of any political candidate, or the advocacy of any political issue. So, for example, the example that you gave, I find disturbing and would be in violation of this policy because, in reference to Mr. Burt, what should have happened is that that teacher, if that person came in, then the person running on the opposite ticket
Right.
should be brought in as well, so that there's no seeming bias.
Right.
Or kids are only hearing one perspective and not other perspectives. So, I mean, I agree with you. I just wondered in terms of does this hit it? Because it's pretty explicit. Furthering the interests of any political party, the campaign or political candidate, or advocacy of any political issue.
If I might.
Mr. Wiskman, yep.
We have similar cases when it would come to, say, presentation of religious viewpoints. That you, from educational standpoints, you may present the views, the theology, or whatever of various religious organizations. And it would seem to me that in the same educational approach, in terms of political parties and the various agendas or platforms, et cetera, do we have policy wording that we could apply in the same manner? That is, regarding, say these kinds of situations. What I'm just thinking is we already have some wording in a policy somewhere that we could use that applies to like the religious components. We could similarly word things for the political party components so we have an even-handed approach in terms of whatever educational opportunities are presented.
Against one political party over another.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. DeGrego.
can I just bring up a personal experience regarding
Relates
this?
to this, sure.
I was running for office, and I got a phone call from the history department at Amity High School, and they invited me to speak for a whole day because they wanted to be fair and balanced, and they had the other person of the other party speak. And then they called me in the following week, and I was there all day talking to all the history classes, explaining my platform. And so I think Amity, if I may, Dr. Fiedler, talk about another school district, had something like that in balance, where I was surprised to get the call, and they said, no, we want you to come as well.
No. I mean, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think maybe we should have something in here that specifically talks about people coming in to talk about their candidacy and, their proposals, and that it should be fair. There should be equal opportunity for all candidates for a particular office. So I think, that should be added to it. As far as the third paragraph overriding or being a substitute for the paragraph that I've suggested, the paragraph that I suggested really refers specifically to the activities of the person who is coming in, as opposed to the school staff. And I think that the third paragraph refers more to activities with the school staff themselves.
I read it that way as well, that the third paragraph really related more to the specific action of a school staff member to do something to further the interest of a political party, the campaign of a political candidate, or advocacy of an issue.
But
Yep.
But I think, especially with middle school and high school kids, and right now, when you have a candidate coming in, that's part of it, is to hear what their political point of view is and what their candidacy about. So if we say they can't talk about that.
Well, I don't think that's what, I think he's saying there needs to be balance. If you invite in a candidate from one party, you have to invite in a candidate from the other party.
But this paragraph that doesn't allow for that.
Right, and I'm suggesting we need to expand this to allow that,
What if we were to look, because I know I'm a little fuzzy here, but I know this is one of the policies that was, given as a sample. I believe there were a couple of others, so we could look at language, because one of the things, I hear what you're saying, and I don't have any issue with what you're saying, but I think that I'm a little worried about the language here in the sense of that the person associated with a political campaign shall be restricted to those in an educational nature that are beneficial to students. I think that, so what might happen is that the teacher is assuming that that's why the candidate is coming in, and then the candidate starts to put forth pretty strong opinions on a particular thing, and the teacher's in the position of having to spot the candidate. I think what we would want to do is be more explicit and say, if you are going to bring candidates in, you have to make sure that you are bringing in representatives from every party, so that students hear the opinions or the thinking from all of the parties and not just one, or something to that effect.
No, I agree.
That's what I'm wondering. So I'm wondering maybe if we, it
So
would
you'll
be
look
better
at
if
it
we see,
further.
if we could find
Yeah.
some other language in that, and just to kind of see, is there another policy that captures it, if that's okay?
Yes, Dr. Gregory.
And as you're looking, if there's the option to find things that refer to different candidates versus different parties, just because there are a lot of minor parties that might get overlooked and you don't want to open up that can.
If I may ask for clarification as we're trying to craft the language, the revision here talks about candidate or person associated. It seems this is speaking to folks who come into the buildings. I wonder if we can make it more general, I think closer to the original language. If we're going to show 15-minute clips of speeches from major political candidates for presidential election or congressional election, you want a fair and balanced approach to that as well. So if we limit it to people coming in, then we're ignoring that a lot of it is digital media now that we're going to be exploring. So if we could, that's more along the lines of what you're thinking.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
So let us do a little bit of research on that, because I know this is a standard policy that's in a lot of different districts, and also take a look at, as I said, I vaguely remember that there might have been 2 or 3 samples that were suggested to us. But the most important thing is what I'm hearing is the board feel that this is an important policy, which I agree also. And I worry about the kind of thing that you're suggesting. Quite frankly, I also worry about individual teachers also, inadvertently kind of showing their bias, one way or another in a comment or as you said, something that may be shown or an article that's distributed, and if it's one-sided and they never hear the other side, then we run into the same issue. So,
Ms. Federico?
If I just may offer a comment for clarification, my expectation would be that we would make the offer to candidates from both parties, or however many candidates are running. However, if only one candidate accepts, that would still be acceptable, right?
It would be acceptable to me.
Right.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
So I think it's important that you look at some broad language that, Mr. DeGrego.
Yes, that's exactly what they said to me. They said, you don't have to, but we are offering it to you.
Right.
Would you like to? And I said, certainly.
Okay. All right, so you'll do some more, Mr. Whiskeyman.
Just a thought triggered from your comment on biases, since we all have our biases, whether they're hidden or not. Recently I saw an article that they had a robot judges beauty contest, and the robots all picked almost all white women, and it goes back to, well, robots are programmed by engineers, and it turns out that the engineers had hidden biases which they reflected in the programs of the robots. So, even though they were trying to be fair and balanced, we're all afflicted by that. That goes back, in the history of our own lives. So, it's difficult to really craft something that truly gets at the root of those things. So, yeah, I think we need to do some extensive work here to try to make sure we work through this.
Right, but again, what I hear board members saying is that we want to make sure that if students are to hear political views, that they hear
A balance.
A balance.
A broad base.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Good, that's good.
Very good. All right, thank you. So I would suggest that we do, since we have Mr. Jagosinski's piece of paper that has his revision for 13312, that we, while we have it in front of us, we go to that one too.
I'm just suggesting that there's the first sentence, the actual large paragraph, that we add at the end of that Upon the resolution of the issue, the superintendent will promptly report the resolution to the individual who referred the complaint. If someone comes to me with a problem, I recognize it's not my job to resolve that problem, or it needs to be referred to the superintendent. But I do feel an obligation to make sure that that is in fact resolved one way or another. I think that the superintendent should report back to the board member what the resolution of the problem was.
Well, although there may be some instances where she cannot say specifically what the resolution was. There
Right.
might be, she can tell you it was resolved, but she might not be able to say what the resolution was.
Right, I mean, certainly I would have no problem saying, please, I want you to know that this was, I addressed this with this parent and, and this is where it's at. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with talking about the resolution, and the reason I say that is oftentimes it's around a student issue, and I can't, under FERPA, I can't talk about a student. Even though you're a board member, I can't do that. So that's, but I think in terms of even just sort of hearing back and saying, was this ever taken care of? I certainly could do that. I certainly can. What I usually try to do with an individual board member, or if a parent emails 3 or 4 of you, is to say, I will follow through with this. And I do, and then you don't hear anything, so the assumption is that, yes, it was followed through, but I can certainly get back and just simply say, this was taken care of. But more often than not, I'm really not in a position to be able to talk about, well, how was it resolved?
I understand that. That's perfectly reasonable, but the fact that it is resolved.
It's just bringing closure
Right.
to it.
So are you expecting something to be noted in the policy, or you're okay with her?
I'd like to have this particular sentence added to that paragraph.
But she can't always, what she's saying is that she cannot always report the specific resolution. So what you're asking for is that the resolution be reported to, like, that we be told what the resolution was. That's.
Yeah, no, I'm not, then
Can
the
we
words
just say
can be
report
changed.
that the issue has been resolved?
That's fine.
If we did that?
So the superintendent will inform the individual who referred the complaint that the resolution, that the issue has been resolved?
That's fine.
And so this is specific to board members?
Yes, because he's saying,
Right.
so he's asking that it be inserted, therefore, whenever a complaint, so the first full paragraph, second sentence, is it, therefore, whenever a complaint is made directly to a board member or an individual, it will promptly be referred to the superintendent for study and possible solution. Upon resolution of the issue, the superintendent will inform the board member
Yeah, I mean,
who referred the complaint that the issue was resolved.
Yeah, and the sentence above talks about an individual. I mean, I hear information from somebody out in the community. I'm not going to call that person and say, here's something.
No, he's talking about board members.
No, I know that. So I think there needs to be, because the sentence before talks about board member or an individual.
Oh, I see what you're saying, okay.
So here's the question that I would ask, and this is not that I'm looking to get out of something. Is this, seriously, I mean, but do we want to put this in a policy? Or do
I don't
we
think
want
it
to
belongs
just,
in the
or do we
policy,
want
I
to
think
say that you say to me, if one of us brings forth a problem, we want to make, we are asking, we're not asking, we are basically directing you to get back to us saying this issue was taken care of.
I mean, I've never known you not to do that personally,
Well,
so.
well, actually, though, I mean, yes, I have. I mean, in the sense of if, if one of you passes on something to me, da-da-da-da, and I say, I'm on this, or we will take care of this, I don't then email back the individual and simply say, by the way, I just want to let you know this has been taken care of. So, I mean, I haven't done that. I'm just wondering whether it belongs in a policy, and it's not looking to skirt anything, it's just, this is really about it's about the complainant and the procedure that they're supposed to follow.
If I may offer a comment, on the one hand, I see the point of putting in a policy because, we have to think about how we want it to be implemented in the future. If there were, say, another superintendent in place. But I'm also thinking that this may not be necessary for every single complaint. And by putting it in the policy, it means that it has to be done for every single complaint. So maybe it's something that could be requested when the complaint is sent. Can you please let me know when this is resolved? That seemed like more of a practice that could solve it rather than a policy.
Mrs. Krasinski.
Is there another place, I know we have tons of policies, isn't there another location where there's written directives that the superintendent sort of has to?
That would be in our governance policy has executive limitations. And I would venture to say that that's more where this belongs because it's the relationship between the superintendent and the board and versus, I mean, that's really, you're speaking specifically about board members. So that's more, and it probably is in there somewhere. I mean, I can look and through it but that's really more where that belongs than in district policy. Because it involves the relationship between the superintendent and the board.
I'm not very comfortable with the way we handle complaints because I get the impression that if a parent doesn't follow this process, teacher, principal, superintendent, board of education, that what we want to do is we want to educate them in the proper process. And while we may want to do that, if somebody complains at any level, they should not be re-educated. They should be taken care of.
Yes and no. And I think it's on an individual basis.
Mm-hmm.
But so, for example, if a concern is, and I receive concerns frequently from parents. The first thing that I'm going to do is get a hold of the principal and say, can you just fill me in here? To which, more often than not, the principal will say, Betty, let me call this parent. And quite frankly, 90+% of the time, it's taken care of, which is really how it should be. So it's not dismissing the parent, but I'm not even going to talk with the parent if I don't have a context for what has occurred here. On the other hand, there are times when I am dealing directly with the parent, where I actually will sit down and meet with the parent, and I know you do the same thing, or you do the same thing, where we will sit down, and maybe where I may say, did you talk with the principal? No, I didn't, and here's why. And I may say, I really think it's important that you do that because the principal is going to be the one who's, whatever it may be, or maybe if it's something that I can resolve, I will resolve. The reason why, and this is standard in most policies of books, it's because you really do want to try and resolve it. So, for example, if something happens, in a classroom with a student, and the parent the next day comes to me, or even goes to the principal, the first logical question is, well, did you talk with the teacher? Because the teacher was in the classroom. The principal wasn't, and certainly I wasn't. So it makes sense to say, did you talk with the teacher? Well, no, I called you first. But don't you think it would make sense to talk with the teacher to find out what was happening with Johnny and Susie and so-and-so? That's part of what happens, is because then, quite honestly, more often than not, it takes so much time for me to gather all that information, just because I'm 3 levels removed. So you try and move it back down to the building. Is it always moved down? No. You know, what I can say to you is that, you know, if a parent is insisting to meet with Jeff or myself or with Jim, we'll meet. We don't ever refuse to meet. We don't ever refuse to meet with parents, ever. But if it can be resolved, and the good thing is that we don't have principals who are saying, pushing it off. They really want to resolve it at their level. So, you know, I got a message on, what's today? Today's Monday. On Friday, a parent had called me. I didn't get back to the parent. I get a message from the principal later in the day saying, I know you got a call from Mrs. So-and-so. It's taken care of. You don't even need to call her. Great. Because that's where you want it to be taken. I don't know if that helps.
I understand.
I think the first sentence in this policy gives the overarching philosophy that, you know, we want things to be handled as close to their origin as possible, because, I mean, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think as close to the origin as possible is the most effective way to get a situation handled. Is it always handled there? No, it's not, but I think that should be the goal, in terms of just an overarching. But so if you're okay with it, you know, I will delve into the policy governance manual, which, I mean, we all have it, but, because I do believe that this belongs more there in terms of the superintendent's relationship with the board.
Okay.
So, okay, so there was a change on page 2. This one, Dr. Green.
Correct. It's, this was the piece where there was a piece of the narrative that was left out. So that's what this is, and I know there's a typo there, which it should be an apostrophe S, giving the school's position to the parent. And then if the parent is not satisfied with the answer given to the principal here, may appeal to the Board of Ed through the superintendent.
Do you have any further questions or concerns with this policy? And seeing none, I'm hearing that it's okay to move this to a second reading?
Yes.
As it is. Okay, so we're at 9:20. I'm going to suggest that we, unless anybody has any big objections, that we stop at this point.
So for clarification, Mrs. Clayton, so are you suggesting that we then continue or bring the other policies back at the committee of the whole meeting, or are we looking to the business meeting?
I would suggest that we at least do these second readings and approvals, you know, the few that we've done, 1, 2, 3, 4 policies at the committee of the whole meeting.
Okay.
And I'm guessing that we probably, I was really hoping to get this done by the committee of the whole meeting, but we're not. Because we still have, how many more do we have to do? 1, 2, 3, 4. And we have 4 more to do. And I think, I'm not sure how much conversation there was with those 4. So we only have, I mean, it's already 9:25. I think our committee of the whole meeting is probably already pretty full with the assessment report. So if we can do those, just those 4 at the committee of the whole meeting, I would appreciate that. And then we can pick up the other 4 that we have to do at the October business meeting. But if that's a problem, we can talk about it. All right, so when we pick up with review, it'll be with policy 1313, at whatever point that is. So we're going to move on to the human resources report, right? When Dr. Fieser's ready.
Great, thank you. You have my report with a list of job postings as well as all the personnel changes for the past month, which you can see are many. We have many of our new teacher hires on that list, as well as a lengthy stipend appointment list, which is pretty standard for this time of year. These are all the annual stipends, such as team leaders, department chairs, etc., that we appoint at the beginning of each year. I just wanted to also report that we have hired 33 teachers thus far, and are still in need of about 5 teachers at this point, which the searches obviously are well underway. We have offers out on a couple of those, etc.
Questions for Mrs. Kasdan? Yes, Mr. Jackson.
On the high school stipends, what is TRB contributions?
TRB is Teachers Retirement Board. So if something is stipend is TRB-able, it's a part of their main job, and that those wages get reported to TRB and count towards their retirement.
And what is 092?
092 is a certification endorsement code for administrators. So if somebody has that 092, we refer to it as, they do get paid a higher stipend for that department chair or department liaison stipend.
And under Jonathan Law, the data specialist, there's no position allocated and there's a person in it.
That was, let's see, I'm not sure. The data specialist, we have stipends listed in the contract, and we also have stipends listed in the budget book, because the contract isn't as up to date sometimes. So that data specialist has been around, I think, for 3 years, 2 years?
2 to 3 years.
Yeah. I believe it's allocated somewhere, I'm not sure which. It's probably in the budget book, not in the contract.
Dr. Gregory?
I had one question on the freshman team leader for Jonathan Law. There are 3 individuals named, and there's no differentiation for the 092 or not holding the 092. Is it because all 3 of them hold the 092?
No, I think just for the team leaders, that it's not considered, it falls under a different category. It's still a TRB-able stipend, but it's not quite the same for some reason as the other department heads. They're not leading a subject area, they're just in charge of freshman class. So I'm not exactly sure of the distinction, but it's always been separate.
Ms. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering if there's anything you can tell us about the cafeteria aides at Live Oaks. There's 4 terminations in just that one area.
Well, I also wanted to mention termination. We have a lot of cleanup in here. It's not like there's something. If it's like in the area of substitutes, if somebody hasn't subbed for us for a while, or we don't see a need for them to sub, we take them off the payroll. So it's termination in that regards.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if the lunch aides fall under that category or whether they were asked to leave. I don't have that information in front of me right now. But every year our lunch aides are reappointed.
Okay.
So they're either asked to come back or not asked to come back, or some people choose not to come back. So
okay.
It can vary.
Jagosinski?
Do we have any classes at this point that do not have the permanent teacher yet?
I don't think so, because the openings that we have are not classroom teachers. For instance, we're looking for a library media specialist. So we have substitutes in those. We're looking for 2 right now, one at Harborside and one at Mathewson. So we have long-term substitutes, or substitutes who will hopefully not be long-term, but in the time being while we're searching for a permanent teacher. So that's 2 examples. The other, a literacy coach at Harborside, again, not somebody who's charge of a classroom, maybe they pull kids out or work with teachers, an enrichment teacher. We call back a retired enrichment teacher to take that on until that person can be found, et cetera.
Was it unusual to have so many teachers give their notice so late in the year?
Unfortunately, no. It happens every August. And I attribute it, I think we had this conversation in public schools around Connecticut. People take off in the month of July, and then all of a sudden August comes around and everybody panics, and we're all stealing teachers from one another, and it's kind of the domino effect, unfortunately.
Other questions or comments? All right, thank you.
The last item under the superintendent's report is the disbursement report. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Dr. Krieger and Mrs. Glenn. You have in your package the cash disbursements report for the month of August. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions for Mr. Riccitelli? Mr. Whiskeyman?
I noticed a number of payments for insurance purposes, insurance premiums, et cetera. Help me understand, I thought the city paid the insurance.
The city pays for the health insurance. But the premiums that you're seeing are, I think you're referring to like the Hartford Life Insurance, Unum Life Insurance. Those are contractual. Under some of our bargaining agreements, employees have life insurance policies.
One large one to the health insurance premiums.
And the
in
Blue Cross
particular
Blue
that
Shield.
jumped out at me. And that was on line fiscal
Oh,
year.
sure. I'm sorry. That's the over 65. We pay active employees. The city covers that on the health insurance. Retirees, we cover on the board side.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Riccitelli? Okay, thank you very much. Move on to consent agenda. Ready?
Motion that the Milford Board of Education approves consent agenda items. Number 1, consideration of minutes from August 22nd, 2016 business meeting, August 31, 2016 special meeting, and September 6th, 2016 special meeting.
There's a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We have no new business tonight. Board comment? Any board comment this evening? Dr. Gregory.
The Woodmont Amateur Radio Association is running their courses again in October, and they are encouraging any students who are interested, as well as any community members who are interested in learning more about amateur radio to contact them. And then there was something separate. Most of the sidewalks around the schools are in really great repair. Like, a lot of them look new and are beautiful. I noticed on a walk, there's one very poor section of sidewalk near Cap Penn, closer to Pond Point Avenue, that's very crumbly, and it was actually kind of difficult to walk. And it's just not that far from Cap Penn, and so it's definitely within a range that little people might be walking on it. And so there was just one section of really rough sidewalk there.
If you could give Mr. Riccitelli the specifics.
I'll walk that time.
He can reach out to Public Works.
Correct.
It's not our jurisdiction, if you know that, but Public Works has to do that. We don't do
Yeah,
that.
and normally sidewalks are the responsibility of the homeowner. In some cases where it is a walkway to the school, the city may step in and do the work, but normally they would inform the homeowner that they're responsible for fixing it. But if you give me the specifics, we'll definitely turn it over to public works.
Any other board comment? All right, seeing none, motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second? Federico, you gonna second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
I was already in the parking lot, sorry.
Sorry, because it was so close to us.